All right, you're watching the NFL Rundown on our dedicated NFL YouTube channel, talkSPORT Endzone. I'm Will Gavin. Brian T. Smith is here with me. We're in our new off-season, more laid-back digs. We are ready to tackle this off-season head-on. Everyone has finally recovered from Louisiana, from New Orleans. Well, from us recovering from New Orleans, from Brian just going out for lots of dinners with family members as being the local boy. But look, we've got a great show coming up for you today. We're going to be hearing from some big names from the NFL, including Jordan Mailata of the Eagles, Kurt Warner talking about Matt Stafford and his future at the Rams, Gerald McCoy on the Tom Brady's impact at the Bucs continuing, and then what that could mean for the Raiders going forward. And we might even try and get a Pac-Man Jones interview in there, although it's going to make the editors have to do some serious
Is it going to be in
work.
Is it going to be in prison, or like are we scaling some walls to...
the beep machine is going to be working overtime, let's put it that way, with some Pac-Man Jones chat on the franchise tag. So all that coming up, and we're going to do QB Domino today. So who are the quarterbacks? Where do they need to fall? Rodgers, Stafford, Darnold, beyond that second tier of Fields, Russell Wilson, Cousins, even Daniel Jones, what that's going to look like. We'll talk Combine as well, but just to start off, a fun story that's come out overnight, Brian, as we're recording this.
Fun. I don't know if this is
Monday
fun.
morning.
Let's do it, Will.
The Philadelphia Eagles, current Super Bowl champions, two-time Super Bowl champions in the last 8 years. 8 years ago, did not go to the White House when President Donald Trump was in power. 8 years later, reports are the same decision will be made again, that the Eagles will not be heading to Washington, D.C. Not stunned because of the history, but considering he was at the Super Bowl this year, maybe a little bit more awkward.
And he was cheered. He was actually cheered at the Super Bowl. Taylor Swift was booed. The whole talkSPORT crew was there. Look, let's just preface this, Will, with a huge reportedly, right? Because it's still a ways away. Often you might do this visit during start of training camp, right? So it's months away. It has not been confirmed. I'm sure if and when it is, Donald Trump will probably weigh in on his social media account. But yeah, this would be a very interesting decision and we're not going to get political. We're not going to get political, but at a very, very interesting time in America, in Europe, with everything going on politically, and to have today on a Monday, should be Combine Monday, the Philadelphia Eagles reportedly inserting themselves into the international political conversation. Yeah, that's pretty interesting, man.
The thing is, right, so when the Eagles didn't go 8 years ago, there was a very specific situation going on. It was right around the time of all of the taking the knee, the Colin Kaepernick conversation, and Donald Trump had come out and said that you have to stand hand on heart. It's the only way that he sees it as being the case, and the Eagles were very specifically taking a stand against that, about players being allowed to protest if that was their decision. So there was something very specific about it. This time it feels, I can't work out if it's more politically charged because it's just, we're doing it because we want to do it.
To me, it feels more, to me, reportedly, it feels like they're basically saying, we don't like this guy. We do not want to, we do not want to be there. We don't want to be within, 500 miles of the White House as is right now. But it's not Saquon Barkley making that decision. It's not A.J. Brown. I mean, I'm sure it's a team decision. If it is reportedly made, it feels to me more like a Jeff Lurie organizational, whoever it is, the Eagles mascot. That feels like an organizational decision that basically to me would say, if it happens, we don't want to be associated with the current and former president of the United States of America. Whether you like it or not, that is what it feels like.
The man is the king of pettiness, as we know, like, as well as being the president of the United States.
Who's that, A.J.
Yeah.
Brown?
But there is this hilariously petty thread going through from when they didn't go 8 years ago, where like Donald Trump posting on his Truth social media, congratulated the Chiefs for making the Super Bowl, congratulated the Bills on a fantastic season, did not mention the Eagles.
It's the king of petty.
He did a pre-game interview with Brett Kyer of Fox, and he said, he was rooting for the Chiefs. He was expecting the Chiefs to win. He gave loads of love to Mahomes, and obviously Brittany Mahomes.
Donald Trump, biggest Brittany Mahomes fan in the world, apparently.
Huge Donald Trump fan herself. I did look at it and go, like, I hope the Eagles are doing this for legitimate reasons, but also I kind of don't mind if it's really petty. I'm like,
bring it.
Let's put pettiness on pettiness and make them feel all the more silly.
This is where it's already at. So this is happening like live as we speak, and who knows? This may end up getting corrected and they end up going. But this is how the world works, right? Like let's have fun on this show. So someone named Toxic Cowboy on Twitter, at Toxic Cowboy 1. The Philadelphia Eagles declined to visit the White House. Wish I had known this before the Super Bowl. I wouldn't have wasted my time rooting for them. Eagles fan, ? Your team sucks. Sunglasses, smiling emoji, and thumbs up. On top of that, Megyn Kelly says, same, all caps, go F yourselves, Eagles. My husband is a fan, so I got on board, but F this BS. And it hasn't even been confirmed. That right there, for the billionth time, tells you where we are at. And we don't talk politics on here, but you can't even breathe anymore without talking politics.
Do you know what I forgot about from that visit 8 years ago as well? That as you were talking about, I was reading up on the reports. I forgot that when the Eagles decided not to attend because of the whole taking the knee stuff, that Donald Trump suggested that he cancelled the trip. Like he went on his Twitter account at the time and put, the Philadelphia Eagles football team was invited to the White House. Unfortunately, only a small number of players decided to come, so we cancelled the event.
Oh my God!
Like, it just has to be like. I know it was obviously my decision.
Anyways, I'm not saying good or bad. I am saying that it is a fact, and he would admit this, that Donald Trump, the President of the United States of America, twice, does at times act like a second grader, right? It's like, you did this to me, so I'm doing, I was never going to invite you in the first place. Like, oh, you don't want to come over for an after-school party. Well, you know what? You were never invited in the first place, and we hate you, and we're never going to talk to you again. Like, that is kind of how they operate. I remember we spoke with Jeffrey Lurie at the Super Bowl. He's been in the middle of some of this stuff before. It's such an interesting time. I mean, Robert Kraft has been outspoken. You have owners who are very, very involved in the community and race relations, on and on. The fact that this goes back, and you reminded me of this, so long with Trump, and the Eagles win again, and it's hotter than ever in America, right? Mm-hmm. You know, I mean, like, Germany has its elections, and the first thing I do, I'm on the tube coming to work, and the first thing I see is the chancellor, I mean, the whoever was just elected in Germany. I'm not a German political expert, but basically the response was that we have to go it alone. Now we're going to do this in a post-U.S. world, on and on and on. Well, it is we're not going to get into international relations, but it is the middle of everything, to the point that we can't even go 2 weeks after the Super Bowl and get in the combine without there being a report that the Eagles aren't going to go to the White House around training camp. That is how controversial, how convoluted, how politicized everything in the world has become.
Just to finish off on some Eagles stuff, because we did obviously, like, the first
By the way,
time...
you became famous. Like, can we just do this?
Oh, God.
You are now famous on the internet. That's an honor. I mean, how does it feel? Because I look at you a little differently now.
It's weird that it's so specific to Eagles fans, right? To the point where, like, anything I've tweeted out from our videos and stuff from the Super Bowl, if I post just a normal video, it does okay. It's, it gets the kind of normal pickup I'd expect. But I posted Gerald McCoy talking about Jalen Carter, and it got thousands of views and thousands of likes.
You're big in Philly.
Because suddenly I'm Philly famous, which might be the best kind of famous to be. Like,
are the Eagles preventing you from going to the White House? Because maybe you would have been part of the trip, man.
Trust me, I ain't going anywhere near that place. But I am attempting to leverage this into, and I'm going to keep saying this on the show, I am attempting to leverage this into, I think we should be going to the opening game of the season.
Why not?
Doing comms in stadium for that game.
Feels like a talkSPORT thing.
Do loads of media.
We just sent a
out
crew
there,
to New Orleans
for
the Super Bowl. It feels like you should be in you should be there for the first game of the year.
I did look and see if I could do the Eagles game plus the Brazil game in Sao Paulo, which is the day after. I'd have to, as soon as the Eagles game finishes, drive to JFK, take 2 connecting flights and then a 6-hour bus, and I'd only arrive about an hour and a half before kickoff. So I don't think we're doing both games. But I'm pretty determined to be out there in Philly for that. I've had a lot of love from the Eagles fans, and they've not been a franchise that, with my 49ers hat on, I've always had the best of times with. But look, I shook Big Dom's hand in the dressing room.
That's an
honor. He, I'd fallen out with him after his spat with Dre Greenlaw on the touchline. We're now good buddies, obviously. Wouldn't do an interview with us, but apparently didn't do an interview for anyone. So that's I can accept that. I think I'm on board with the Eagles from a vibes perspective, from like a team perspective.
Philly's definitely like they either love you or hate you. There is no in between in Philly, and if you're on the love side, you are in at least for the next couple years. They're going to want to fire you at some point.
It's well worth checking out on the YouTube channel if you go to talkSPORT End Zone. Behind the scenes video from in that locker room, interviews all the players and stuff. And actually, just because some of this stuff after the Super Bowl gets lost in the mire, I just wanted to bring one of those interviews now because Jordan Mailata has been such a sensational story for the International Player Pathway Program, for Australia, for the growth of the game internationally, for stuff we care about as the British and assumed British covering the sport in this country. And I did manage to catch up with him in the locker room after the game.
It's International Player Pathway superstar, and Super Bowl champion, Jordan Mailata. How does that sound?
I mean, I just got here into the locker room. It's insane. I don't even know how to feel. I just cut off my tape. Just got done doing media. I come in here. It's Can't take that away from us, man.
As a guy who the story's been told so many times, coming from your rugby background, never taken a snap of football before you got here, to a Super Bowl champion, how wild is that?
Wild, brother. I think it's hard, man. I think we always want to focus on the end goal, and if you just take it one step at a time, and you can complete a lot. But man, it's such a surreal feeling. I'll be honest, I don't know how to describe it.
What I love is we're friends with a lot of your International Player Pathway friends. Lewis Rees-Zammit was with us earlier. All those guys, Christian, Colin Williamson, rooting for you in a big way, man.
I love those boys, man. And the IPP will always be a special place for IPP in my heart, man. Love that. Love the boys. Love the program. Love the whole thing about it. The aim, its reach. Got big things for IPP.
I've actually got a slight bone to pick with you. I was doing commentary with CSW earlier this season on a London game, and you FaceTimed him in the middle of the game.
It's not my fault. I didn't know that you guys were doing, but when he answered, I figured, I was like, I know what he's doing. My bad. I hung up right away, Look,
to be a team that's gone from 2-2, when people were calling for Nick Sirianni's head just 3 months ago, to Nick Sirianni taking us to the Super Bowl championship. Talk about him as a head coach.
I mean, what are they going to say now? You got to give him his flowers. But we don't listen to whatever anybody says outside that building. We know the coach that we have in Nick Sirianni. And this is proof in the pudding. Oh, that flower is blooming right now. That flower is blooming.
And actually, just finally one on Saquon and Jalen. Just one on Saquon and on Jalen, just that offense and what it's like blocking for those two.
And they make it easy. They make it easy for me and the rest of my boys. I'm just so proud of everyone, man. So proud. They took everyone.
Couldn't be happier for you, man. Congratulations.
What was that?
Congratulations.
Thank you, man.
A Jordan Mailata superstar left tackle. And honestly, I really, ramming this home, an astonishing story that, there are guys who have succeeded on this international player pathway, right? F.A. Abada has been a good rotational pass rusher. I think if the Commanders aren't going to guarantee him a spot next year, or it's going to be looking more like practice squad, based on what he told us, and again, this will be a video you can watch on our channel, he's going to look to go elsewhere. He still has a few years left in his body that he wants to go and play for. It's a good story, but it's not going to the league, having never played a snap of football, and becoming the starter at one of the 4 keystone positions in the NFL.
That is amazing.
On a Super Bowl winning team. It is astonishing, and he's a lovely, lovely man. And just the right amount of nuts as well, which I think you need for a lineman. And yeah, I think he's brilliant. So really glad we could get that into the show as well. Should we turn our attention to the Combine, because it's coming up. How are you a Combine guy? Are you a big Combine fan, Brian?
I've covered it a lot, right? I've been in Indy for the entire week. I've done the whole deal. I've been there when the Houston Texans had the #1 overall pick and they had a new head coach and they were the center of the NFL. I've been there when the Texans, well, there was a time when the Texans, all they needed was a quarterback, right? Before they had Deshaun Watson, and they needed to have C.J. Stroud because Deshaun Watson ended up being a total failure there. I've done the whole deal. I have gone from loving the Combine to hating the Combine to loving the Combine again. The Combine, to me, there is no bigger symbol in the NFL and really in the American sports world, Will, of the NFL taking a very small thing that really is for insiders only, and not that long ago, you didn't see anything for. They were doing this inside a building, and they're just running around and throwing, and they're not even wearing pads, into a week-long event that takes over Indianapolis that you have to watch on TV, that goes viral. Patrick Mahomes, every year, I love this. We cover this a lot at talkSPORT.com. His 40 time was horrible. It looked like he couldn't run. NFL now loves to show that video of how slow he looked. He loves to tweet about it. It is a thing. I mean, it is a thing. And for me, it is the NFL understanding how to maximize its yearly calendar. We all forget it's the biggest sport in the world. In many ways, it's obviously the biggest sport for us, but the NFL really, you're playing 17 games a year, and you're maybe making the playoffs, or maybe not. They've been able to take the Combine, which is basically the same Combine it's always been, and turn it into a week-long thing. And so I've gone between loving it and hating it and love it, being over here and being able to cover it and do some interviews and be in the middle of it. We were talking about going out to the Combine this year. Maybe we go next year. I love it again. It is essential viewing and watching. And what it really does is, this is where the NBA has struggled. Baseball struggles. The NFL gets you invested in the next generation the second that the previous season ends. And so the second the season ends, and we're talking about the Eagles in the Super Bowl and done in free agency, you're now getting invested in Shedeur Sanders and Cam Ward and all these guys, and the quarterbacks become bigger and bigger, and it just keeps that machine rolling for the NFL.
It's going to be well worth checking out. Again, not to harp on too much about talkSPORT Endzone. Look, we're not going to be doing the most comprehensive in-Combine coverage. We're going to get a couple of good interviews on and people breaking down some of the winners and losers, and I think there are some really key players that we're going to be keeping an eye on, and maybe we'll talk about on next week's show, like who impressed us, kind of winners and losers type thing. But from my perspective, every player we talk to over the next 3 months, we will be looking for their Combine story. We'll be looking for their draft story. Everyone always has a great story of a wild question that they were asked in an interview by a team, or like a way that a certain member behaved when they were doing those interviews, or like, the way that they were drafted and how that came about. And all those stories are fascinating. It's such a kind of personal time of year where you hear so many of these amazing, like, coming from these rags to riches stories and having these amazing kind of tales of how people get to the NFL. And look, there's guys I'm looking out for. There's certain players that I think we're going to have to really have our eye on. I think everyone obviously going to look at the quarterbacks.
It's always the quarterbacks, yeah.
What Cam Ward does, what Jalen Milroe does, what Shedeur Sanders does from a testing and medical perspective, because he's not going to be throwing. He confirmed this week. They are going to be holding a kind of pro day, but we'll get to that in a moment. Just before we do so, one mention. I love the fact that it was confirmed this week that Travis Hunter will be taking part. Not only will he be taking part in drills, but he will be doing both wide receiver drills and DB drills. Yeah, that's fantastic. And is really leaning into the two-way play.
Yeah, and I don't know how that will work in the NFL, like on a practical level. The only thing comparable that we've seen in recent history in any really big American sport is Shohei Ohtani being a pitcher, incredible pitcher and incredible hitter, obviously. Formerly with the Angels, now with the Dodgers. I covered him up close for a long time. Ohtani is better than Babe Ruth at this point. I mean, he is a generational impact player, but that's baseball. Baseball, you're not getting hit. I mean, there's no real contact. I don't know how that's going to work out for Travis Hunter. I do know that Shedeur Sanders, for me, and I'm going to write about this at talkSPORT.com, I I'm very interested to see how he and Deion handle this, because they have been building toward this moment for this has been years in the making. And he is a top 5 pick. He is a top 10 pick. At one point, he was going to be the number 1 overall pick. He is good. I don't know what you think, and we're going to talk to the draft experts about where he actually stacks in terms of being a QB prospect, and is somebody going to burn a top 3, a top 5 quarterback pick on him. I do know this, Will. Quarterbacks always rise. Like, this is one thing that I learned 10 years ago, and it's really, we saw this last year where you had, 6 quarterbacks going, and then by the top 13, teams are already setting their quarterback position for the next 10 years. But they have leverage, and you have Shedeur Sanders who understands the game and how to play it and cashing in on your name. He's talked a lot about not wanting to go to a bad team, not wanting to go to a cold weather team. He's backed off of that, but as it gets closer, I'm just very interested to see where this goes, because you end up, having covered this very closely and dealing with agents, all this stuff, you end up knowing where you're going to go a couple weeks before. Now, it might be,
if you're at the very top end of the draft.
It might be a couple hours. There might be some change. You might slide. You might go up. But if you're locked in, you usually know a week, 2 weeks before where you're probably going. And so if Shedeur Sanders knows that he's going to the New York Giants and doesn't want to deal with that, or the Cleveland Browns doesn't want to deal with that, the way the CBA is set up anymore, it completely discourages you from holding out. But somebody's going to do that at some point, and he has all the NIL money. That's what I think is interesting. Like, he doesn't need money. He could sit out a year. He could try to wreck the system. I'm not saying that I'm a fan of it, but somebody at some point is going to do that, and he, to me, would be the test case for that.
Interesting, both from that perspective of that idea of rejecting, and I look at the very top end of this draft, and there are a couple of teams there where you don't want to land if you can avoid it, who may well be looking to take a quarterback. If the Cleveland Browns really fall in love with him or Cam Ward, do they say, look, Deshaun Watson's out for this year, but let's be honest, he's never playing for us again. We're going to have to eat that contract no matter what happens. So let's get cheap at quarterback with a rookie and try and piece together a winner, despite the fact we've got this $60 million hole in our
and Myles Garrett doesn't want to be in Cleveland anymore. That's where I just think it's interesting. Like, what if Cleveland decides that they want Shedeur Sanders and they're going to go all in on him, and there is no proof if you go to the Browns you're going to win. Myles Garrett wants out of there. You're not winning. You are not winning. It's a cold weather city. I love Cleveland. I love the fans. It's a great fan base. It is going to be really hard to turn that thing around. You want to go waste and be the next Daniel Jones and waste the next 2 or 3 years of your career? I think at some point, these guys have to stand up, because some of these organizations are run so poorly, and I think it'll flip at some point, but it usually takes a player. It takes an error. It takes a time. Eli Manning did this about 20 plus years ago and now is on the verge of being in the Hall of Fame. I just think it's an interesting test case with Shedeur Sanders. What
I don't necessarily see is if the Titans or the Browns selected Shedeur Sanders and he said, I don't want to play here, I don't see an Eli Manning situation. I don't look down that draft and see the Jets at 7 going, all right, we'll give you the 7th pick,
flip up,
plus our second round this year and our second round next year. You give us Shedeur and we'll take Cam Ward, if he's still there, or whoever, and we'll do. I don't think he's that good of a quarterback. Eli Manning coming out, for as much as
that's a great point. That's a great point.
As much as his Hall of Fame candidacy, I think, is rightly debated, and in fact, I don't think he has a candidacy. He'll get in. I don't think he should be in the Hall of Fame. But that's maybe a conversation for another time.
I think Eli Manning should be in the Hall of Fame, but he is not a first ballot type of guy.
Okay,
but Eli Manning. There's a lot of in the NFL Pro Football Hall of Fame. I'm fine Eli Manning being in the Hall of Fame.
He played 6 good games in his whole career.
He has 2.
They just happen to be 2 postseason runs.
He has really good stats. He won 2 Super Bowls. He beat Tom Brady in the Super Bowl. Passing yards in the playoffs. He is near the top in NFL history. I can allow Eli Manning in the Pro Football Hall of Fame, not on the first ballot. But we could. This is what we do. We agree and we disagree.
Right. This is the question, right? Joe Flacco had the exact same run with the Ravens, going to that Super Bowl where they beat the 49ers and won a Super Bowl MVP on top of it. Should he be being talked about in the Hall of Fame because he had the one postseason run and won the Super Bowl?
I would have to look at the numbers together. I know that if you run the numbers on Eli Manning, he would be a lower level Hall of Fame quarterback. Again, this is why I'm more old school. I'm going to go through history. Eli Manning has better career passing numbers than a lot of quarterbacks who are already in the Hall of Fame.
Existing in a later period of football, though. Right, this is completely off topic of this. This is definitely a topic for a whole separate debate during this offseason. But my point is that you've already got the fact he's not throwing at the combine, which I think you're seeing more and more so people happening. And the reports are coming out that teams who have spoken to him, who have already had visits, who are planning to speak to him at the combine, like all of the feedback so far, smart guy, picks up plays really quickly, like that he's really got the kind of mental side of the game down, right? My thing is if Cam Ward goes there and has a sensational combine and is suddenly moved above him on a lot of draft boards. And we had, there were reports, Brett Hoffman I saw had this report that the Jets were willing to give up their 7th this year, next year's first, and 2 2s to go up with the Titans to get that number 1 pick because they want Cam Ward. They think that he is the guy that can elevate that Jets roster from also-rans to contenders. And so I'm not that convinced about Cam Ward. He's not that player to me, particularly when he's going to a team that doesn't have a great offensive line. But there are teams who will convince themselves of that. And so if Shedeur Sanders not only finds himself slipping behind Cam Ward and then tries to pull some nonsense with not going to the Browns, you've suddenly got this huge drop-off to, you know... Nobody is trading Shedeur Sanders for Jackson Dart and some picks, right? Nobody thinks that's a good deal. So I'm less convinced Sanders will do that. I'm still convinced he goes top 3, top 4 though.
I do know though, covering the draft year after year, covering it last year for talkSPORT, interviewing Daniel Jeremiah from NFL Network, interviewing Matt Miller from ESPN, these people who they live and breathe it with their mocks and they're there and they're talking to people all year. It's a year. That's what a lot of people don't understand. The NFL draft is a year-round event for the people who are seriously invested in the people that have the draft Bibles that are this thick. But I remember last year talking to I think it was Daniel Jeremiah or Matt Miller, I can't remember, but they mentioned Cooper DeJean. Mm-hmm. In March, in April, we had this story at talkSPORT. It was, who's out there in the first round that's not getting enough talk that we need to pay attention to. They mentioned Quinion Mitchell and they mentioned Cooper DeJean. We had those stories at talkSPORT. My gosh, as often as we love to say that somebody's wrong and they missed it, how right were they to know that? And that is why NFL fans love the draft, because you can rebuild your team in 1 year. You can't add these pieces. Jaden Daniels, all we did with the draft last year, Caleb Williams. Jaden Daniels was sitting there. Now, let's see where we're at in 5 years, 10 years. But right now, if you're drafting, who do you take, Jaden Daniels or Caleb Williams?
Yeah, Jaden Daniels.
Okay,
but
I'm saying that's why the draft is fun. That's why people get so into it, because you can change your entire future with 1 pick.
The bigger point for me there, though, is when I look at this year's draft. So last year I had my order, and I'm happy to admit my order was wrong in the end. Caleb Williams was top of my board, then Drake May, then Jaden Daniels. Right? I would still have Drake May, Jaden Daniels 1 and 2 with Caleb falling below them. If you put Shedeur Sanders and Cam Ward into last year's draft, neither of those two are cracking in that top 3.
They're not going in the first round.
They're not going
in
4,
in terms
they're
of
not going
quarterbacks,
5. We had 6 quarterbacks going in the top 12 picks.
Yeah, they're not
plus
going in the first
Raiders
round.
sitting there at 13, head in their hands going, how did we not
nobody was
land
going to take 8
quarterback?
quarterbacks in the first round last year. I mean, that's the thing. This year's combine and draft do feel a little down. I do know, though, once it's on TV 24/7 for a week, and then you have the draft build up and ESPN takes over, it's such a big deal. And the quarterback, I've just seen this every year, the quarterbacks keep rising. Like Drake May in March of last year was not a top 5 pick. Drake May was questionable middle of the first round when you talk to the experts, maybe even late first round on and on. He was a prospect. He had issues. By the time it's all over, Drake May, you got to give him in the top 5.
Right, we're talking a lot of quarterback, but let's talk about the quarterback dominoes, because a lot of this with Cam Ward, with Shedeur Sanders, with everything happening in the draft, there's going to be a huge effect prior to the end of April, beginning of May, right? Because we have so many dominoes that need to fall in the NFL right now. We have, in terms of quarterback needy teams, we've named a bunch of them, but the Browns, the Raiders, the Giants, the Steelers, Jets, Saints are kind of the 6 that really stand out to me at the moment. The Titans, sorry, as well. And as much as the Titans seem convinced they're not going to take a quarterback at the top of the draft, there are these veterans floating out there, whether it's Sam Darnold after his sensational season in Minnesota, doesn't look like he'll end up back there, although there's a chance of tag and trade is a possibility. You've got Aaron Rodgers floating out there. We know he's not going back to New York. We know he's not going to be, we know he's not going back to the Jets at least. Let's not count our chickens.
Aaron Rodgers to go to the Giants, right?
Wouldn't it, right? Wouldn't it? And then you have this Matthew Stafford situation, right? Matt Stafford is currently sat in a position where he's 36 years old. He thinks he can play at a high level for 2-3 more years in this league. So what he's asking the Rams for is a new contract, which gives him good money to cover those 2-3 years to ensure that he is their starter.
To give him some security at the end of his career, and he doesn't have to bounce around the league, with his family, with his wife. I totally understand that. The
reports are that the Rams are convinced that he would be their guy for this season, but they are less convinced from 2026 onwards, and they don't want to commit $100 million,
which I also understand.
To 2-3 more years of Matt Stafford. Even with an out after 2 years, they're probably still spending $100 million in terms of guarantees over that 3-year period. And so there's a lot of trade talk right now. Before we get into our thoughts on it, let's hear what legendary Ram, Hall of Famer Kurt Warner joined us on Radio Row this year, and what he had to say about the idea of the Rams trying to keep hold of Matt Stafford.
I think so much of decisions like that become, do you feel that your team can be competitive for the next couple years? I think Matt, he's a top 5, top 7 quarterback in the league at this point. No matter where you want to stack him up, that if you want to win as a team, then you don't get rid of guys like that. Getting rid of Cooper Kupp, which it sounds like they want to, make a trade for Cooper. Like, do they feel like they're not in that window? But I look at this team and what they did this year, and they took, the Eagles to the end with a chance to win. They got a great young defense. Puka Nakua's unbelievable. Matthew's playing at a tremendous level that I just think, I know he wants to play a couple more years. If I'm the Rams and I believe my window to win is right now, there's no way I would even think about moving him.
The thoughts there of Kurt Warner on Matt Stafford. He says, keep him. You talk to anybody
if you want to win now, keep him. Yeah.
Our buddy Jordan Rodrigue, who joined us on Radio Row, is a great beat writer for the Rams. She's saying, of course you keep Stafford. The Rams right now are in a Super Bowl window. That
Matt Stafford almost had, it was not Matt Stafford's fault they didn't make the Super Bowl. Matt Stafford had them in that game in Philly, in the cold, there at the 13-yard line. That was Matt Stafford. That was the defense and Jared Verse and Sean McVay. But Matt Stafford was incredible in that fourth quarter. And you were reminded he was one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. Does Matt Stafford go in the Hall of Fame?
What I'll say is I think he easily had his worst season as a Ram overall last year, but he was coming off the back of that elbow injury, and it was very up and down, but he improved as the season went on and played well in the playoffs. I personally think Matt Stafford is a Hall of Famer. I think when you consider what he managed to do on a Lions team.
Yes.
And yes, he had Calvin Johnson for part of that time, but even so, it's still the Detroit Lions, right? From my perspective, when I look at this Rams team and what they're trying to achieve now and how they've approached everything in recent years, right? They had the F them picks run, which got them to the Super Bowl, and barely any team has ever been able to behave like that. To be able to just truly say, we don't care about the draft, we want to win in the next 2-3 years, we're going to throw all of our picks out there, and we're going to get Jalen Ramsey, and we're going to get all of these great, we're going to get OBJ, and we're going to just go out there and we're going to find...
And it's going to work. Usually, if you were to do that, it's going to blow up in your face. It actually worked for them.
We're going to bring Von Miller, and we do all of it. We're going to just absolutely go out. And it worked, and it did. But what you then saw was this knock on that over the coming years, and I think you've seen this a little bit with the 49ers after the Trey Lance move as well, is that they haven't been able to build through the draft, and all of their keystone pieces up until 2 years ago were 30-plus, guys that they traded for, some of them guys that they drafted but were getting on in age. And then they come out and have back-to-back 2 of the best draft classes we've seen in recent times in the NFL. They've drafted 4 linemen, and 4 defensive linemen and an offensive lineman in the first 2 to 3 rounds of the last 2 drafts, all of whom look like Pro Bowl, maybe even all pro level starters, right? They've got, I sort of think they've got $36 million in cap money this year, and everyone's like, oh, they could sign free agents. You don't sign anyone because that money rolls over. You keep that money because next season you're paying 4 guys big contracts, right? For me, those drafts have kept them in a Super Bowl window. And if they'd thought about Matthew Stafford last season, I totally get it. And I kind of get Cooper Kupp to an extent. But I do not understand moving on from Matthew Stafford. And
Where do you go? I mean, that's my problem. If you're going to move on from him and you have Jared Verse and you're still in a contender, you're in a division you can win, right? So it always starts with your division. Can you win that? Yes, you can. No offense to the other teams in the division.
No, it's
but you can win that division, right? If it all goes well for you and you have good quarterback playing, good coaching, good defense, good offense, you can win that division. All right, can you make a run in the playoffs? Yes, you could. Matthew Stafford is toward or at the end of his career. But who's going to be better for you? Justin Fields, Daniel Jones, Russell Wilson, Aaron Rodgers. Okay, that would be interesting if Aaron Rodgers was still really good. But who are you taking? Okay, we have the same team, general manager, same cap space, whole deal. Who are you taking? Aaron Rodgers or Matthew Stafford?
Right now, Matthew Stafford. 100%.
I'm taking Matthew Stafford. So who is that's what I understand about the Rams. That's why I completely echo what Kurt Warner is saying. I thought Kurt Warner was, and he's always fantastic when we talk to him at talkSPORT. You're still trying to win. You believe you can win. You have a roster that can win. Why are you getting rid of your quarterback? And it'd be different if Matthew Stafford was a problem. I mean, maybe you don't like his wife going on social media all the time or whatever, but Matthew Stafford seems like a pretty good guy. He's pretty low-key. He works hard. He has some injuries. That's Matthew Stafford. I just don't know who they're going to get that's better than that.
And look, you asked if he goes into the Hall of Fame. There is one Hall of Fame that he definitely makes it into in terms of the NFL, and that's the Get the Bag Hall of Fame. Because he's right at the tail end of the new CBA, the designated cost of draft picks that have now been assigned in the NFL draft. And you think about those contracts that Sam Bradford got when he first came to the NFL. These guys were coming to the NFL, being drafted at the top of the draft, and immediately getting $30 million a year, which I know now is a mid-tier starter. That's what you're going to give Geno Smith.
No wonder it didn't work out with Sam Bradford. He might have got a little too much money up front and maybe didn't have that joy of that special thing that you need to win. He maybe didn't have it.
To me, when you've earned $360 million over your career and you've got the option of going to the Giants and getting another $100 million guaranteed over the next 3 years, or going to, and the Steelers maybe is slightly different because they do have a defense built for a championship, and you think if they get a really good quarterback in there and maybe some slightly inspired coaching from the coordinators, that they could be a Super Bowl team, right? But most of the other teams on that list aren't close to sniffing another ring. You just think to yourself, would I take, and this is it, it's always the easiest thing to spend is someone else's money, right?
Right.
But would I rather take $60 million over the next 2 years, but a real good shot at winning a second ring? If Matt Stafford wins a second ring, he walks into the Hall of Fame.
Oh my gosh, yes.
So do I take that, or am I really concerned about that extra, $5-10 million a year when I consider my career earnings and when I consider what I could earn beyond this career? I hope that this isn't Stafford making a bad football decision. I hope it's not the Rams making a bad football decision. But if he does move, I think we see this absolute cascading domino effect of
Where do you think Aaron Rodgers goes? How does it work with Aaron Rodgers?
See, I can imagine a world where Mike Tomlin talks himself into being able to...
I was just thinking about Aaron Rodgers and the Steelers. While you were talking, I was thinking about Aaron Rodgers and the Steelers. Aaron Rodgers, New York Jets, the whole thing, an absolute disaster. But Aaron Rodgers can win in cold weather. Aaron Rodgers was Green Bay for a decade and a half. Aaron Rodgers, there's not that much of a difference. No offense to the Packers or the Steelers or those fan bases. There's not that much of a difference between playing in Pittsburgh and playing in Green Bay in terms of the weather and the fan bases and the history and the expectations. It's about the same. It's about a wash.
Yeah.
If I'm Aaron Rodgers, my God, I'd rather retire than the New York Giants or the Tennessee Titans or the Cleveland Browns.
Can you imagine him going to the Raiders with Brady?
Yeah, no, it's not going to work. The only situation, and I think could get the best at Aaron Rodgers, would be the Pittsburgh Steelers, because you already have that defense and you're set up and you're a playoff team and you've got a coach and you're not going to have to fight for your job. That is your team, and you do it for 1 or 2 years, and then you are gone. If Aaron Rodgers goes someplace, and he's not, but if he goes someplace like the Tennessee Titans or the New Orleans Saints, if he's just doing it to hang on because of his ego, which I would not put that past Aaron Rodgers, I wish he would retire and just get this thing over with.
The Steelers are also probably the only team who, if he brought along his harem of wide receiver buddies, would probably accept them with open arms because they don't have any.
Could you imagine Aaron Rodgers dealing with George Pickens? Like, that is a rom-com. That's Bridget Jones 5. Like, Aaron Rodgers with George Pickens. That is a reality show, man.
Literally, the only receivers they have on their roster right now are George Pickens, Calvin Austin III, and Roman Wilson, their third-round pick from last year. Oh, I like Roman Wilson quite a lot. I took him in my Dynasty fantasy drafts because I like Roman Wilson, but I really I look at their offensive line, a couple of pieces away, maybe a guard away from being a decent line. I look at the fact that they could get a receiver, maybe a big free agency receiver. This draft is running back heavy. You get someone else in to complement Najee Harris. The Steelers look like they could be a winner immediately with Aaron Rodgers, if Aaron Rodgers can be anything like pre-Jets Aaron Rodgers.
There's one more we need to get into, and then let's move it on. But Sam Darnold. I mean, that's another of the big dominoes who had a really, didn't finish great, had a really strong season, better than anyone expected. Looks like Minnesota probably moves on right to J.J. McCarthy. You got to do that. You drafted the guy. It wasn't his fault. He got injured. You have a good team. Who goes out there and gets Sam Darnold? The
only thing that makes sense with the Vikings is to tag him, right? You put the franchise tag on him. It costs you about $42.5 million, I think it is projected right now for the quarterback tag. You've got that you've got that cap space. The cap has gone up this year. It probably restricts you from signing maybe one free agent that you were going to anyway, but it gives you that flexibility of, right, is JJ McCarthy going to be healthy from day one? Are we going to be ready to go? Like, you essentially have the season you were expecting to have last year, where Darnold starts, plays for 4 or 5 games, and then JJ McCarthy comes in.
I know what you're saying. I just don't think that's a way to run a winning team next year. You're creating a quarterback controversy the second you do that. And you're either going to turn it over to J.J. McCarthy or you're not. And they're going to know, Kevin O'Connell, very smart guy, they're going to know internally, yes, J.J. McCarthy is ready or he's not. There aren't that many teams out there that win the Super Bowl that have a $45 million backup quarterback that other teams want. Interesting thought. I don't buy into it.
But this is, and I actually agree with you. I think I think it's just worth throwing out there as a possibility. But you hear the way Kevin O'Connell has talked about it. You hear the way that Quincy Adolfo-Mensah has talked about it. There's an element to it of, like, they really appreciate what Sam Darnold did for them, and they don't want to put him through that as well. This is his moment, right? This is his, I got one shot at a big contract, and maybe I can go somewhere and I can be Baker Mayfield. And so if I'm Sam Darnold and I'm looking at exactly that, and I'm going, okay, I've got one shot at this, I'm going to move on, and Matt Stafford gets traded away, I'm banging down Sean McVay's door and I'm going,
USC guy,
give me a team-friendly deal.
Number 3, I think it was number 3 overall pick out of USC. Sam Darnold back in Los Angeles. That makes a lot of sense. You're not going back to the New York Jets, right? He's not going to see ghosts in New York. But yeah, like Matt Stafford goes to the Steelers. Aaron Rodgers. Rodgers to the Steelers. Rodgers to the Steelers. Matt, where does Matt Stafford go?
Stafford, I mean, probably the Giants, and
which is
the
horrible.
Bag. He takes the bag. That's that's Matt Stafford.
And that's kind of like Matt Stafford's vibe, right? Like he got a Super Bowl. You got to keep the Let's just be clear. Matt Stafford has to keep the wife happy. Like, if there's a player that I think has to keep his wife happy, Matt Stafford is at the top of that, man. She is very, very, very active on everything.
So here's the Sam Darnold thing, right?
And I would imagine she would like New York. Like, you can go be a star, be a reality star in New York, be on some morning show.
Set your podcast up, you'll be fine. The Darnold domino falls down to this for me. If it's footballing reasons, and he takes the lessons he learned from being in San Francisco for a year and the lessons he's learned from Minnesota this year, and he goes to have a longer career, I need to go somewhere and be successful, and this I consider like my second contract, but there could be a third on the horizon, then that's the job for me. If I'm going, I want as much money as humanly possible. Then he goes to Vegas, and the Raiders pay him $40 million a year.
Yeah, and that's not a bad spot for him. I just feel like anyone going to Vegas, Brady's looking over. You're going to underperform. They're not really set up to win. I wouldn't sign there. To me, Steelers, that is a team. The Rams, that is a team. Everyone else, I look at the list, I just don't really see. That's the other thing. All these teams that need quarterbacks, They're not really set up to win either. That's the problem that all those franchises have. The Saints, the Titans, the Jets, the Browns, the Raiders, the Giants. Like, none of those teams are really set up to win.
And then all of those teams you've named there, I just think we end up with some of them drafting guys, and then Daniel Jones is going to pop up somewhere for a year because they're convinced the guy they're drafting, it's better to have a veteran around them. Fields is the only maybe interesting one for me, that someone like maybe the Browns, for example, if they
Justin
don't
Fields with
draft a
Cleveland,
guy
that's an interesting thought. Yeah,
like he's the guy who or could land at the Titans for a year, or like somewhere where he's got a chance to maybe prove himself as a starter. But it all falls down to that top three and where those dominoes fall. And the other, I'll just very quickly throw out the other one that I think is interesting is, does anyone talk themselves into, well, yeah, it was the first year after the Achilles injury. He's younger than Rodgers was. Maybe we can get Kirk Cousins in a trade for late round pick swap.
I would not touch Kirk. I think Kirk Cousins is toast. I think he's done. I went out a pretty big limb last year because when they drafted Michael Penix, and I just, reading everything, knowing the history, it was just clear to me that Kirk Cousins, it was not going to work out in Atlanta. I wrote about it at talkSPORT. Got some criticism, got some positivity, kind of a 50-50 mixed bag. Basically said at the start, it's not going to work. It did not work out. And what I did not like about the Kirk Cousins situation was at the end, him coming out, I think during the Super Bowl, and saying that, I was injured. I was injured at the end. And that was
classic.
That was affecting me.
Yeah.
And I'm like, dude, you can't have it both ways. Like, you can't be Captain Kirk and you like that and be cool and shop at Kohl's and then take the money. But if you're going to do that, you got to tough it out. You can't complain after. But he's like, well, the reason it all fell apart, again, was because I was injured. And so if I'm the NFL, I'm done with Kirk Cousins. He can be your backup. He can be the locker room guy. He can be the chemistry guy in the quarterback room. I'm not giving Kirk Cousins any big money to be a starter next year. No.
But what do Atlanta do? Do they keep him?
Yeah. I think you got to turn over Mike. Again, I think you draft these guys. I'm all for rest and watch initially. That usually is the best way to go. But except unless you're Jaden Daniels. But for me, if you have J.J. McCarthy, if you have Michael Penix Jr., if your team is ready to win 9 games, whatever, you might as well turn it over to those guys. You got to do it at some point. You might as well do it in year 2.
All right. Brian, I'm going to call an audible here and say that we've gone super long, as I probably expected.
I knew we would.
do.
I knew we would.
We were going to talk some free agency, some franchise tag here as well, because the combine's coming out this week. That stuff is already pushed beyond
we
that
got
anyway.
a few weeks away from free agency, man.
We can hold that back. We've got loads of great interviews still to come from Radio Row and from the Super Bowl as well. So keep an eye out for that. Go to NFL End Zone, talkSPORT End Zone. I'm going to get it right at some point. Go to talkSPORT End Zone, the dedicated NFL YouTube channel from talkSPORT. There's so much great content up there already. Ed McCaffrey's flying right now. Loads of people loving that chat that he came over and
Where
had
can
with
they
us.
follow you on Twitter?
They can
Will?
follow me on Twitter at Will Gav.
I'm at BT Smith UK. I had to change it coming over here, but now we have the new Twitter handle that's doing just fine.
Will you then switch to BT Smith US if you ever go back?
I'll probably go back. Well, the original was tied to the previous newspaper I worked at, the Houston Chronicle, so I had to switch it to BT Smith UK. I have one for you really quick. I'm going to my first championship level game this weekend
to go and see
Queen's Park Rangers
at Loftus Road.
Yeah,
it's a great.
So I'm doing
great
Queen's Park
stadium.
Rangers versus Sheffield United.
Yeah,
which should be pretty good. What am I getting into? Because I've done a lot, but this is going to be my first. I'm going to be completely honest right now. This is my first championship game match. I'm excited.
Sheffield United are a really good football team.
Yeah.
They are right up there pushing Leeds. And,
they're getting
Burnley
promotion.
at the top.
Yeah.
They're most likely to get promoted. And QPR are the most
14th,
up and down team
yeah.
in the league right now. But Adrian Durham, the guy who named Loftus Road his number 1 stadium in the country.
I'm excited.
To go and cover games.
I'm excited. The wife is she's going on she has some work going on. I have a Saturday. Doing the 3 p.m. Saturday, I'm super pumped. And for the record, there's gonna be somebody out there. I've done 50 matches already in 18 months, so that's pretty good. Like I'm batting pretty high. But this will be my first championship game at QPR. I'm very excited.
Go to Shepherd's Bush beforehand. Go to a pub around there. Walk down the high road with all the fans. And it's such an odd stadium. You're walking down this high street, like, where is it? Where is it? And then suddenly you cut down this little, like...
I love it.
It's a little bit like Fulham. You cut down, like,
and
this
Craven
random
Cottage is my favorite.
And
is my favorite
there.
place in England for football. Yeah.
I think Loftus Road is... Craven Cottage is probably the closest comparison in terms
well, then
of what it's like.
I'm going to be super happy.
You'll have a whale of a time.
All right.
It'll be a lot of fun. So enjoy that.
I know we went long, but I had to ask. I had it written down. I was like, I got to ask Will about QPR and what I'm getting into.
And that's just the level of coverage that you get here on the Rundown. Thank you to Brian T. Smith. Thank you to Tom and all the team for putting this together. As always, make sure to like, subscribe, hit the little bell, do all that good stuff on the YouTube channel. Get in the comments. We will respond to them from burner accounts probably to slag you off, but at least we'll have fun doing it.
We're going to get some White House stuff, right? We're going to get some Trump stuff this time. And that's 2025, right?
Get involved. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening if it's on the podcast. This has been The Rundown.